Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Life with Plato. Today's big issue that we will be discussing is the ethics behind the killing of Osama bin Laden. Was it just to kill Osama? We'll find out, or at least try. Our first guest today is a very special man with very interesting philosophy. Just what the topic might need. Please welcome Aristotle.
Thank you very much, Plato. I think before we commence our discussion on the issue we must first determine what justice is. Shall we?
Yes, of course. That is very important.
Let us say this. A just man is a man who acts legally, and a man who is equal, while an unjust man acts illegally, takes to himself more external good than he ought, and he is also unequal.
I think it is safe to say that the actions of the just man represent justice, while those of the unjust man represent injustice.
That is very true.
Now, when you say the just man acts legally, do you mean to say that the law is perfect?
Yes, of course. The law represents everything that is just. Just actions are those that are capable of producing and preserving happiness. You see, legal justice is a perfect justice, my friend, because he who possesses justice is able to employ it towards another person and not only himself. Hence, it is essential to producing happiness in a group of people and not just the individual.
Let me call upon an example here. If you were to draw a table that you were looking at, you would notice that these two things, that is, the table itself and the drawing of the table, are not the same. You see, one possesses depth, actuality of size and exactness, while the other is flat, not to scale, not exact. Now let us think about law. We all have the idea of law, which, as you mentioned, represents that which is just, and that which is just is capable of producing and preserving happiness. Like the table, would you agree that the law is the actual?
Yes, certainly.
And the application is very much like drawing a table, which deems the application of the law less perfect than the law itself. Tell me, when you referred to law as being perfect, were you referring to the idea or the application?
I was referring to the idea, for the application is always relative to the situation, and as you know, the situation is always different, which means the application is different too. The application of law will always be done in such a way that it fits the situation.
But each situation has an ideal manner by which it should be handled, and the ideal law provides the guidelines.
I guess you have a point.
Let us move on now to your statement that the just man is equal, which implies that justice is equality. But equality in what sense? An eye for an eye.
When one man lands an injury on another, corrective justice must be practiced, because the unjust person comes out better off. He receives the lesser of the evil and the greater of the good. There must be a restoration of order. This is where the judge, who is nothing but animated justice, takes away from that which is greater and adds on to that which is lesser to equalize the imbalance.
Your theory seems to be very material-based. How do you explain restoration of order when human life is in question? We all know one cannot bring back life once it has been taken, and taking another life to equalize will only worsen the issue. How exactly do you expect order to be restored?
As I mentioned earlier, justice produces and preserves happiness. Taking the life of a man does not produce or maintain happiness, for it affects the state as a whole. That man had a purpose to at least one person. His departure not only affecting him, since he is dead, but those he is purposed to. We can therefore agree that an eye for an eye will only diminish happiness, since more people become affected negatively.
So how is order restored?
It cannot be, because as Heraclitus once noted, everything is constantly changing, which means that order is constantly changing. But the underlying theme is still the same, change.
I think we can both agree that we do not know perfect just, but only possess a mere idea of what it is. But, with that said, we must still use our limited understanding to discuss the issue of Osama.
We most certainly must.
What is your opinion?
Well, We concluded that taking a man's life will only cause more harm because it affects those who he is purposed to negatively. On the other hand, keeping Osama alive held a threat to the Western world in the form of his supporters. There is a much deeper issue than just that of Osama's life. It lies in the cause of the terrorist actions. If Osama was kept alive, there could have been reasoning between both sides upon which a compromise could have been made.
With the limited knowledge of justice you possess, you have managed to provide quite a concise response.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
We must move on to pass the discussion on to our second guest, another man of great opinion. Let us welcome Immanuel Kant. Thank you very much. Let us have you define justice, just as Aristotle did, if you may. Yes. According to my categorical imperative, justice can be defined as a universal right, a maxim that follows the universal law to do right in all similar situations. It comes down to my second categorical imperative. Treat others as an end and not only as a means. What do you mean exactly by as an end? And also, what is a maxim? Well, first, a maxim is an action that is paired with a motivation. Second, the end goes all the way back to the categorical imperative. The categorical imperative rules out possible maxims as not being universalized, therefore are forbidden to use. This means the maxim could or would not work in a possible world which is similar to the real world. Thirdly, every rational being is an end in itself and must be respected. Also, we legislate possible maxims for ourselves to reach a better end. We formulate these maxims because everyone has some end in view, and these maxims would not be important if no one thinks they are. That is what gives it value. This is why we treat others never as a means in itself but always as an ends. Would you agree that the ultimate end is the good in the form of happiness? Yes, I agree. Okay, now, for there to exist justice, society must be in harmony, and this involves everyone performing their roles. The husbandman must provide food, the blacksmith must make several metal tools, and the retailer must be able to sell. Each of them interdependent on the other for survival. Not survival in the barest form, but survival in achieving the ultimate end of happiness. The husbandman is dependent on the blacksmith for tools, the blacksmith on the husbandman for food, and both on the retailer for the sell their goods. Although this is a very simple example, will you not agree that we each use one another as a means to the ultimate end of happiness? Well, the thing about my categorical imperative is that there is always space to move around. It is not set in concrete, therefore if two people agree to use each other as a means to reach a similar ends, then it is okay. My universal law's second step states that you should imagine a possible world where people with similar maxims follow similar principles. If it all works out and both people are happy, then yes, I do agree. It is safe to say that the ultimate maxim in life is motivated by happiness. We must go on a commercial break now. Hello, my friends. Every time I go for a swim, dolphins appear. If I was to give you directions, you would never get lost, and would arrive at least 5 minutes early. My legend precedes me like lightning precedes thunder. I'm a lover, not a fighter, but I am also a fighter, so don't get any ideas. I once punched a magician. That's right, you heard me. My blood smells like cologne. I can speak French and Russian. I once had an awkward moment just to see how it feels. I am the most interesting man in the world. I do not always read books, but when I do, I prefer the grade 12 philosophy textbook. Now that we have reached an understanding, what exactly do you think about the manner at which the West handled Osama bin Laden? There will always be a dispute since different cultures clash every which way we look. It is hard to find common ground when there are such radicals as Osama bin Laden, but this is what the West is always fighting for. For a democratic government, for a place where everyone has rights. Stalin, a man who killed millions upon millions of his own people, even said to his captives, "Everyone deserves to be tried in order to come up with their punishment. Maybe not a fair trial, but a trial nonetheless. Stalin believed this to be true because that is what we are fighting for. If it is wrong to kill someone without a trial in one situation, it is wrong to kill someone without a trial always. What about universal law? There is a three-step formula for the universal law. These 3 steps, if are relevant to one's maxim, an action paired with a motivation determines if the maxim is considered universal or not. The first step in this formula is to state the maxim in clear terms. The maxim surrounding this issue is, I will assassinate for the benefit of the world I am living in. Osama bin Laden was assassinated by the United States of America in order to create a safer place for the West to live in. Secondly, imagine a possible world in which everyone in a similar position to the real world followed the maxim with the same principles. If this was the case, people would be able to kill anyone that caused danger to the area and made it a worse place. These people would then be able to carry on their lives like nothing happened, since they would not need a trial to explain the reasons for the assassination. This world would go down in shambles, and is completely irrational. This is the third step, the deciding point to see if there are any contradictions or irrationalities that arise from the possible world. Living in a world where no trials are needed upon killing a person would create chaos. Therefore, the maxim of assassinating for the benefit of the world I am living for is not possible and does not pass the test as a universal law. The assassination does not pass the humanity formula either. The humanity formula is the categorical imperative second maxim, which states we should never act in such a way that we treat humanity, whether in ourselves or in others, as a means only but always as an ends. This is a big flaw in the second part of the universal law, besides the point that killing others without fair judgment through trials is ethically wrong. People also forget that Osama bin Laden was a human being. This brings a very real side to the argument. Deep inside this monster, at the core there was a human being. Just like any other human being, he followed a religion based around Judeo-Christian beliefs, made in the image of God. He had kids and a family, a father and mother, just like other human beings. Osama bin Laden came from a wealthy family with over 50 siblings. His father was a construction worker who became wealthy by building a palace for King Abdulaziz ibn Saud. Osama attended university and studied economics management and business administrations. His sister spoke of him as a kid who loved horseback riding and playing. Even though Osama had the privilege of being a human does not mean he should be alive right now. By all means he had control over his own life and his own actions. Every action has a reaction. His actions portrayed bad reactions. The bottom line is he is a human being like everyone else, and going back to my idea of right action, if one person deserves a trial, everyone deserves a trial. Very well said, Kant. I think we would all be doing ourselves a disservice if I did not ask of you opinion on the issue as well. This, my friends, is a very complicated question. I must take a step back from everything and look at this from the viewpoint of the state. And by the state I mean the whole world, because it is interconnected and interdependent. Justice is what keeps both the state and the individual happy and in harmony. It is most representative of the form of the good. In order for the state to be in harmony, there must be justice, which dictates that each member perform their duty, whether it be shoemaking, horsemanship, or guarding. The problem today arises because the state is segregated into several nations, each with its own agenda conflicting with those of others at times. It is as a result of this conflict that injustice is recognized by one side, that being the oppressor, while the oppressor sees it as justice. This is very evident in the conflict between the terrorist group and the Western world. Each side is justified in its belief that their actions are just. But the truth is that neither side is right. Justice is ultimate, and where it truly exists, both parties are on the same page. All parties are on the same page. There is no two sides, there is only one side, justice. In order to have this ideal justice, there must be one philosopher king who rule the world, under which there are others for each nation. This way there is no segregation of the nations. The world is one. If injustice occurs, the whole world recognizes it as injustice. Such a world, though, would be the ideal world. We must consider the limits of our world and reduce justice to a compromise between the two parties, as you mentioned. Osama was the head of one side of the conflict, making him extremely influential to the whole issue. Now that he has been killed, another had moved into his place and the cycle continue. For there to be justice, we must get to the root of the issue through reasoning rather than cutting away the branches. Well folks, that's all the time we have today. I hope the discussion gave you some insight.